Welcome to another presentation by NYJavaSIG. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at NYJavaSIG and to visit our webpage at javasig.com. You can become a member. It's absolutely free. Follow us, attend our meetings. We'd love to have you. Today, we're going to have the Quarkus World Tour. We have 3 speakers, all from Red Hat: Jeff Beck, Daniel O, and Eric D'Andrea. And I'll give the stage right now to Daniel O.
Yeah, thanks for joining the Quarkus World Tour. My name is Daniel O. Actually, my colleagues Jeff Beck and Eric Andreas, D'Andrea here, they will join us soon. And there are some technical problems for Jeff Beck. He needs to start his computer, and then hopefully he will join in a minute. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen first, and then let's try to get started some stuff here. So let me try to share my screen first. All right. Can you see my screen? Okay. Once again, I really appreciate you joining this Quarkus World Tour and give us some chance to promote Quarkus World Tour. This is not happening just in New York City, but we are really hanging out a lot of the Java user group to promote the Quarkus thing and introduce what Quarkus is and what is the benefit and what is the next thing of Quarkus, a little bit more focused on developer stuff. So yeah, thanks for hosting us. And then here is our set list, some kind of agenda for today. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the quick introduction of what Quarkus, and then we just move forward to 3 interesting demo. So we're not gonna talk a little bit about some kind of slide aware thing, but we spend a little bit more time to focusing on the live demo, the first demo. Showcase like a hello world, but a little bit more focus on developer productivity in terms of how Quarkus is capable of increasing developer productivity with some IDE tools and developer tools, something like that. And if you have any question during the demo, please don't hesitate to ask your question in the chat room, and we are more than happy to address your question. In the meantime, in the second demo, we're gonna demonstrate how to evolve existing Microsoft application to serverless function. Try to deploy that application into Amazon Lambda. So, but just not only Amazon Lambda thing, because the Quarkus actually enable Java developer to have a multiple option to buy the Amazon Lambda thing. It'll be interesting stuff. Should be fun. In the last demo, so actually whenever we run this Quarkus World Tour thing, and we got a lot of questions from developer with some actually similar and same question, specifically Spring Boot stuff. So the common question came from previous Quarkus Tour. So what is the difference between Spring Boot versus Quarkus, and what is the pros and cons, and what is the benefit and trace when you adopt Quarkus instead of Spring for specific use cases, for example, reactive programming or traditional imperative application development, but also serverless function or event-driven architecture or cloud development or hybrid cloud, multi-cloud strategy, etc. So we're gonna really focus on the pros and cons, and with this reactive application to showcase the demo 3. All right, so who's on the stage? So my name is Daniel O. I'm working for Red Hat as a technical marketing major, a specialized cloud-native runtime, for example, Spring Boot, of course, Quarkus and Node.js Vertex, and a single sign-on based on Keycloak, and the data grid, a lot of cloud-native runtime and services to build your own cloud-native architecture from Microsoft's application to serverless functions. In the Jeff back, he is my colleague. He is a product marketing major to evangelize a lot of cloud native thing and also a lot of Red Hat middleware portfolio and products. And Eric DeAndrea, he is one of my colleagues, working with my same team and another technical marketing major, and he is a really great experience around the Spring Boot and a lot of some great technology expertise around Spring Boot application, but also Quarkus and a lot of Red Hat middleware technologies. And all of you are, so any question, as I said, just don't hesitate to ask any question around the Quarkus, but also Red Hat technology or cloud application development stuff, etc. So here
Daniel,
is, okay.
Hey, Daniel, this is Jeff. Sorry, I'm in.
Okay, there you go.
I apologize, everyone. I was trying to get into the Zoom invite. I just want to introduce myself and say a few things before Daniel kicks things off. That I think this is the 20th Quarkus World Tour stop so far, and we've had tremendous feedback. And what I enjoy most about this is that no two stops are the same. So what we typically do is obviously cover the central themes and cores of Quarkus. What we like to do is whoever the presenters are, so across the Quarkus community or across Red Hat, we like to allow them to basically do what they do best. So if they have a certain area of expertise or a certain I don't know, like an API that they really are proud of or they use a lot, they really cover that. So this will be a unique and a custom event. So we're looking forward to that from that perspective. I am watching, and I know Barry and Neha are watching the chat as well. Please don't let Daniel and Eric talk on their own without chiming in. We think it's a success if we don't quite get to all the demo information. So please chime in and stop us along the way. So Daniel, I'll give you a little bit of a break here. I kind of wanted to set the stage because it looks like there's a few new people to this jug, and there's and some people that are probably new to Quarkus. So what I wanted to do is just take like 2 minutes, no more than that, and kind of set the stage for all the cool stuff Daniel and Eric are gonna showcase. So when we think about Quarkus, this community project is about 2.5 years old at this point, maybe a little under 2.5 years old. And it really started because of the need for Java to evolve with some modern architectures. So when we think about, Java being 25 or almost, was it 26 years old now? It was really built, the traditional Java stack was really built for throughput, right? Throughput at the expense of footprint. And the applications were long running at the expense of startup speed. And, they were rich dynamic behavior that were kind of run on the fly. And so when we think about the Java world, now we think about this new world, we realize that not everyone's in this cloud native world yet, but they're either thinking about it or kind of know that it's coming. We think about, throughput being handled by scaling up and down of containers. And we think about those containers being shut down just as quickly as they were started up. So the fact that they're immutable now. And because of that, footprint and performance matter more. So, that's really where, Dana, if you can go to the next slide, that's really where Quarkus came in, was to create the supersonic subatomic Java, right? Supersonic meaning that it's fast to start up, subatomic meaning that it has a small memory footprint, smaller disk size. So when you're thinking about, these immutable containers scaling up and scaling down, all that matters, and it's magnified by, hundreds or thousands. Next slide. And so, when we talk about this tagline, we really talk about, so what is Quarkus? Really, it's a Kubernetes native Java stack that can be deployed both on OpenJDK Hotspot or GraalVM. And the best part about it is that it leverages the APIs and standards that you're used to. So it's the Java you are familiar with, but applied to this, I guess it's called a new world of cloud native development. And we think one of the most important things is the developer joy. And we realize developer joy is a tongue-in-cheek phrase. What is developer joy? And that that changes for every individual. But what we like about Quarkus, and we're going to showcase it extensively here, is the developer focus in terms of tooling, familiarity with the APIs, best of breed frameworks, those kind of things. So we really like that piece of it. Next slide, Daniel. I promise I'm going quick. One of the things that we always like to lead with is that Quarkus has this great developer mode where you can change and your code is compiled on the fly, and so you can see the changes directly in your browser if you're doing some front end work. So Daniel's going to showcase all that. I think next slide. I think that's it. No more slides. So I just wanted to thank everyone. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll kind of be watching behind the scenes while Daniel and Eric do their magic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, so we're gonna jump in the demo. The first demo is just hello world. So I'm gonna start my presentation, and here we go. So there are several ways how to get started Quarkus application development. Maybe you can go to Quarkus.io, our official page on the community project. You can go to start coding, and then this is just a Quarkus project generator, such as the Spring Initializer, but it's more than that. You can print some extension. Just imagine enterprise Java application capability to integrate the web application capability, and then integrate the data transaction like a CRUD capability, put in your JDBC driver like a PostgreSQL, MariaDB, MySQL, etc. And also there are a lot of ecosystem and natively integration your Quarkus project like a messaging and a core, something like that. You can use a Maven or a Gradle and even Kotlin, and then put in your any application and just generate it and download, and then just unzip file and then open your preferred IDE tools. But this is the REST version is Quarkus 1.13. So, but today I'm going to use the REST 1, Quarkus 2.0, but this is not official release yet. But I'm going to showcase a really more cool thing for developer joy, even more developer bliss. So here is my local terminal window. And then, as always, for developer preferred way, I'm going to use the Maven command line, such as Maven generate my project, and here is my latest version 2.0 CR3, and then we're going to have some plan to release 2.0 GA in the end of the June. And then once you create the project, you can find some of the resources also automatically generated on your local directory. For example, so Maven wrapper. Here we go. And the configuration, also Docker file to build this application, deploy Kubernetes cluster, and some of the example application. So let's see, here is a getting started project just generated, and then just change the directory right way. And then I'm going to use my preferred IDE tool, such as VS Code. And then once open your VS Code, so where can I hide this one? Cannot find it. Okay, I'm gonna move here. Okay, here is my application. And when you this is a Maven project, and then the default dependency already pulled down your local environment like REST easy to expose the RESTful API, and also the unit test for your application, and the CDI injection based on Arc dependency. The generated application is very simple, like a hello world I mentioned earlier. So, but one different thing is just RESTful API. Like maybe you are so familiar with the have some experience to develop the hello world stuff based on RESTful API application. Okay, that's it. So I just create my application from scaffold, and now from scratch, and now I'm going to run this application using Maven command line, like a Maven Quarkus dev. This one of the feature of the Quarkus to provide a developer to run your Quarkus application as a local runtime. But once the Quarkus runtime got started, you can have a live coding capability, which is really awesome for developer. In the end, this feature increases developer productivity tremendously. So for example, as the usual in-loop development workflow, the developer always needs to change the code and redeploy and repackaging and starting your runtime, but you don't need to do that any longer with the live coding capability from Quarkus. Here is the live coding activated, and one of the interesting feature Quarkus since Quarkus 2.x here, the test poses, which means you can start your continuous testing capability on Quarkus runtime. So let's try to open new window. For example, 8080, the landing page, localhost 8080. So this is a landing page of Quarkus, and you can find some material, how to get started Quarkus application, how to set up your IDE tools. And the interesting is, here is endpoint. You can show that the hello. I'm gonna make it bigger to see. And then when you go back to the welcome page, here is the dev UI. So this is one of the good feature. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. This is one of the feature of the Quarkus to provide the dev UI for more interactive to your application development runtime. So for example, here the compilation. So actually you complete all bunch of the configuration and keys, values on your property file, like a YAML file or a property file. But sometimes you just forgot which property already defined on my application runtime. Maybe you try to redefine the same, like a duplication error. But in this case, you can find all configuration and a more user friendly, I mean GUI friendly. You can change that and update that and automatically sync to your local property file in a minute. And then when you go back to here, the one of the good example here, tests not running. This is a continuous testing feature. You can actually start from dev UI, also back to the terminal, press R, and then it automatically start your testing. And when you open terminal window here, it's this only read-only view, but you can still see all logs from your runtime. And then I just tested all testing and actually rerun your application. Let's go back to application code. I'm going to change the simple return result, maybe from hello to hi. I just save a file and then go back to endpoint. And then you can see here, so you already got the error. I mean, your testing error. But when you go back to your endpoint and reload the endpoint, and you can find the high rest easy. So your function and the application feature is actually works well and without any error. But when you a little bit more focus on test-driven development strategy or methodology, you got an error. So sometimes luckily you got any wrongdoing for your application features capability, but sometimes it's ruin entire your application feature, because once you push this code to centralized container, like the source code control version, and then it will deploy to your testing environment, the QA environment, and the production environment automatically, along with your CI/CD awesome pipeline. So here you just notified, oh, I got some missing error, but I just didn't change my test cases. So this is increase your code quality, and along with your more the robust quality your software development. So to fix that, go back to your project and open your test case and change it here and just save a file, and then back to here. In that case, we can go to terminal window and all tests is running. You can actually rerun, press R and then just try to rerun and automatically done. But one of the magic thing is that in the meantime, I didn't even try to recompile, build, and packaging and redeploy and restart my runtime. I just keep changing my application code, and then at the same time, I just notified test code missing, and then the application automatically auto-wire and hot deploy to my application without any human manual things. So this is really awesome. And then we got a lot of good customer success story when they adopted Quarkus for their production development. And then they reduced much time to develop same capability with the Quarkus, with this live coding capability. All right. So it's not just changes a simple text. Some people doubted, oh, it just changed the end code. What about the actual add a new Java class or method is still working? So live coding capability. Let's try to do that one more thing, a little bit fun. I'm going to add a new Java class, like add a new CDI injection, the class name, like a service, the greeting service here, and then I'm gonna make this application scope here, and then put in the one public method just another hello world stuff, but with some passed on parameter, like a string name, and then return. What else? Like a welcome to Quarkus World Tour and name. Okay, just very simple. And back to our resource file, and try to inject the CDIB. Like in the Spring side, you can use the annotation like auto wire stuff, but in Quarkus we try to use the Java standard way, like inject and greeting service here, greeting service, and we try to add a new method here, so endpoint, something like that. Pass, try to add one, like a greeting, and mapped pass name, return string, and greeting. And then we need to map the parameter here, and the parameter name, keep value name, and the string the variable name, and to make some consistency, and the return, and then just try to invoke our CDIB in here, greeting service, and greeting and name. Looks good. So I just add a new Java classes, brand new one, and put in the new Java method here. And I never ever tried to recompile something like that. So my Quarkus is still running, and here's another terminal window. Let's try to call this like a terminal window. I'm going to using HTTP tool. Maybe you can use a call command, just whatever you want. And localhost 8080, and hello, and a new endpoint, greeting, and then like a New York Java group, something like that. And now we got a new output here. Welcome to Quarkus World Tour in the New York Java user group. And when you go back to your runtime logs, you can find here. So the automatically recompile and restart your application without any innovation by human. So this is a really cool thing, live coding. And then, so in the end, you just need to focus more time to develop your business logic rather than it's boring stuff, but it's necessarily working on your in-order development. So I'm going to stop my local environment. So let's say the next step, I'm going to package this application like a Java file, like a UberJar and Faster or whatever you call that. So using the Maven command line, Maven create, packaging. And then I'm going to skip unit test because we already confirmed the test is working using continuous testing capability. It takes a few seconds to package in your Java file. And then we're going to run this application. The reason why I just package this application, I'm going to showcase how the difference between the normal Java and versus the native compilation, which is one of the awesome capability on Quarkus team. So here's the target directory. You can find here the new Quarkus directory, and then here is the Quarkus running Java file. So in order to run, let me show you the active monitor, my local environment. Here's the memory footprint, and I'm going to run my JVM. And actually, I already running 3 Java machine, and I'm going to make it bigger here, zoom in here. So second largest one, 150 memory footprint, and the smallest one, 64. Just remember this number. And then back to here, and then run Java command line, Java jar, and the target, and then Quarkus run. And then this just a traditional way to run your application. It takes almost 2 seconds to start up the application, and then here is your dependency here. And then maybe second time you can run and a little bit faster because the first time a little bit takes longer. So, but almost same thing. And then go back to here and just making everything working, and then maybe New York Java user group 2, and then just make sure the quick sanity test is working. And then go back to our memory footprint. You can find that here we go, the 93. So memory for consumption, for memory footprint for your single Java application. But it's still a small memory footprint compared to the cloud native Java stack. So we got already IDC report to prove this performance, memory consumption, etc. So here's, I'm going to showcase another thing for native compilation. So I'm going to stop here. And the Maven packaging, but in this case, I'm going to use a profile native, because when you go to project, you can find here. So the all Quarkus project already predefined one of the native comp file. So native profile, which allows the developer to compile native executable file, like a binary, like a Go and Python, and running on GraalVM instead of a Java virtual machine. But there are a lot of some learning curve for developer to build and using some kind of GraalVM API and GraalVM redirection, some of the stuff. So, but Quarkus actually takes care of all that complex thing for developer. They just only need to use this profile, and then using Maven or Gradle command line is a really familiar tool for developer, and then they just have a native executable file based on Java application. So it takes a little bit longer than the normal Maven packaging, because we print all necessary dependency, but also we eliminate dead code when you run this application. So as you see here, we use the GraalVM that in a little bit deep dive technically what happened behind the scenes. This executable file actually running on Subtrail VM as part of the GraalVM components, and also we're going to use a GraalVM compiler to build this application. So it depends on how you implement your application. Like there are many Java methods and many Java classes, so it takes a little bit longer than the Hello World application. So, but normally when I use the RESTful API, it takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to finish native compilation. So this is but just one thing you might need to understand. Maybe you got some question when we needed to use native compilation. So sometimes some developer ask me, do you need to compile native image all Microsoft's application for regardless of Kubernetes deployment or the standalone application? The short answer is it depends on what kind of expectation you have. For example, you got some concern to memory consumption on your Kubernetes cluster because you have maybe 1,000 application pod running on Kubernetes, even that is simple Microsoft application. In that case, native compilation is really awesome to solve that problem. Also, you are looking for some nice Java framework for your serverless application function. In that case, a lot of serverless function have some potential problem like a cold start, because it takes maybe 3 seconds to start from scale 0. But this is one of the big concern in terms of network latency or the user experience perspective. So with the native compilation, it gives you just a millisecond startup time and first response time. So that's why native compilation really fit into some specific use cases for scalability on your Kubernetes cluster, but also serverless function with your event-driven serverless architecture. All right. So this is the almost last part of the first demo. Once I'm done, I'm gonna just run this application. Maybe I'm gonna showcase one more thing for remote development. This is one of the good feature of Quarkus. Still, you can have the 1.x version, but sometimes you need to expand your development life cycle from local to Kubernetes cluster. In that case, the traditional way, you just build the app, you just build application and test the application, and once you're done, you push your code to central source control repository such as Git report, and then one of the CI/CD pipeline just hook up you change the code and the packaging application as a container, Linux container, and deploy to one of the Kubernetes cluster. And then the QA team just notified the developer as you, yeah, we just done, and just make sure everything is working in Kubernetes cluster. And then you try to access the Kubernetes cluster, and then just quick sanity test. If you got some error, or if you find some improvement point, you go back to your local environment and then just change the code and doing the same again repeatedly, build, testing, and push the code, and kick it up your test pipeline and the CI/CD pipeline, and then deploy Kubernetes and just check it out. Takes some maybe 2 hours or maybe 30 minutes, or you need to check that out maybe next day. But what if you could the same capability on Kubernetes cluster, just like your local environment? This is one of the great feature on Quarkus, as we call that remote dev. Okay, we just done.
Hey, Daniel, real quick, just so you know, because you're not able to watch the chat, there are at least a few people, I think 2 or 3, that have said that they've done a little bit of deployment of their Spring Boot apps to Kubernetes. So, any anecdotes or things you can talk about there, keep going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you're done, you got some executable file here. So you don't need to Java command line to run this application any longer. So how to run this one? Just run this application like an executable file, like the exe file on Windows Server. Once you run this application, you just need to hear 49 milliseconds is pretty faster. So previously with same application, we took 2 seconds, but now we have a 49 milliseconds to start up the same application. And then go to just try to endpoint, to X point, and this application totally working. And then one last step is here. So try to check it out, memory footprint here. So now we got an 8.8 megabyte memory footprint. So previously we almost 93, something like that. It's a 10 times less memory consumption, and also maybe 300 times faster than startup time. So that's why the native compilation is really awesome capability for specific use case like a serverless function and high scalability on your Kubernetes cluster. All right, go back to here. I'm going to stop the application. And I think I'm almost done. And one more thing, I'm going to deploy this application remote Kubernetes cluster because the second demo will be shorter than demo 1. So first of all, I'm going to deploy this application to Kubernetes. But today I'm going to use my OpenShift cluster. So deploy OpenShift cluster, Quarkus luckily provide one of the dependency we call the OpenShift extension. So you can actually change your Palm XML manually, or you can use a Quarkus tool on your IDE tool. For example, here, so here's your extension. You can find that OpenShift extension, but also you can actually use a Quarkus CLI tool, like a Quarkus CLI here. So it's pretty easy. And then ext, and then you can find installable. And search, for example, like OpenShift. I'll type here. All right. Okay. So Quarkus extension installable such as OpenShift. So I'm going to add this Quarkus extension here to deploy this application to OpenShift cluster. So I just added it. When you go back to your project, you can actually update your Palm XML, such as this one. And then next step, so I'm going to go to application properly here. So first of all, I'm going to change the packaging format here. Quarkus packaging format is mutable jar. And then also I'm going to add like reload password. This is a security communication between my local to Kubernetes cluster. You can add anyone, and Quarkus package format. And okay, this is, I think, Quarkus package type here. And then I'm going to need to add some OpenShift configuration to deploy this one. So for example, there are Kubernetes clients, and what is client? Cert client, Kubernetes client, and trust cert. It's true because my OpenShift cluster basically uses self-certificate to add the to access the endpoint, based on route URL. So I'm going to use this true, and then also deployment target is not Kubernetes. I'm going to use the OpenShift today, OpenShift. And then I'm going to create route URL expose automatically to access the endpoint. And then the last step is I'm going to add in one, here we go, the environment variable. I'm going to run this pod using live coding mode. So that's it. That's something I'm done. And now I'm going to go back to here and then just one more time deploy this Kubernetes cluster. But let me, if you have any Kubernetes cluster on your local machine or remote cluster, maybe I'm going to give some good alternative way. Here is go to developers@redhat.com here, and you can go to Developer Sandbox. It's you could just sign it up for free developer subscription, and you click on get started with the sandbox with the Red Hat developers username credential, and it give you the small OpenShift cluster with some great tool like a web-based ID tool called Ready Workspaces, but also quick start for Quarkus application, Spring Boot application, etc. So I'm going to use the developer sandbox today, and then one of the good features is you can these OpenShift cluster actually provide the token-based login command line here. So I just copy from here and back to my terminal window. And then I will be the one project, the DOH-dev. Now back to here, the same project. There's no path here, no resource found here. All right, pretty cool. And I'm going to package one more time this application. And I'm going to skip unit test, and I'm going to put in the one more parameter, Kubernetes deploy equal true. So this one option will allow developer packaging this application like creating Java file and then deploy this application to Kubernetes cluster. And then in the meantime, we're going to packaging this application based on containerization for OCI container format, and also push this container image into internal container registry in OpenShift. You can also set it up using external container registry like a Docker Hub or Quay.io. And also, once we're done, push the image into OpenShift cluster, and now automatically OpenShift cluster just try to pull that container image and deploy available the Kubernetes worker nodes. This is what happening when developer just executed this one single Maven command line. So that's it. As you see, here is the OpenShift process just started and try to packaging this application based on OpenJDK 11. And then once we packaging this application to deploy OpenShift cluster, and then when you go to here, you can find the Quarkus application will show up here, and then we can access the endpoint. And then we just run remote demo in my local machine to communicate from local to Kubernetes cluster to have a live coding capability. Okay, so in the meantime, if you have any question from here in the chat.
Dana, there's a few things I want to address in case anyone hasn't seen the chat. Java support was mentioned. So previous to the 2.0 release will require a minimum of Java 11, and then the previous version 1 will work for Java 8. That was one of the questions brought up. And there's a good chat going on right now too with Eric and I can't remember who it is, around the difference between Micronaut and Quarkus. And Eric's got some great information. And Eric, if you want to chime in, if you want to hop off of mute, you could even give your answer to the group.
Yeah, so I don't have any real world experience with Micronaut, so I can't speak to like exactly what Micronaut does and how it's different than Quarkus. I can only speak to what Quarkus is doing, and especially how it differs from Spring Boot. I'm a Spring Boot committer as well, so I have a really good in-depth knowledge of Spring and Spring Boot, but like I said, I can't speak in depth to Micronaut because I'm just not as familiar with what it does.
Thanks, Eric. As Jeff mentioned, the Quarkus 2.x default based on OpenJDK 11, and actually 1.x version you can run the Quarkus based on JDK 8, also JDK 11.
I think that was it from the questions, Dana.
Yeah, cool. Sounds cool. And then in the meantime, maybe I can maybe go through the Quarkus.io here. So maybe some of already some experience to play with the Quarkus application development ahead of time, and then but some of not. So just in case, here is the Quarkus.io, and when you click on the guides, and there are lots of Quarkus application development practice. So for example, how to get started in a core project and a web application. For example, go to messaging, you can find how to integrate the Apache Kafka or just simple messaging protocol with the reactive application, and how to use a WebSocket or reactive messaging and the Kafka stream. There are a bunch of stuff. And then I think it's the Eric will showcase a little bit more the reactive thing, Spring versus and Quarkus thing, and what is good benefit the Quarkus side when you develop Quarkus application. Specifically, for example, I believe Eric will remind that thing. So event burst is only one of the good capability in Quarkus, and then the Spring Boot can now support implement in-memory event burst by default. In order to that, the Spring integration ecosystem or Spring Cloud integration, you need to use that for developing that capability. But Quarkus just provide by default feature to implement in-memory event bursts, because the Quarkus use Vertex for reactive application development. All right, back to here. I got some error. Interesting. Okay, so let's try to one more time here. So sometimes there are some between error, my network, some latency or something like that. So normally I just try to test everything is okay from my local to my developer sandbox, but sometimes there are some unexpected error. This is maybe beauty of the live demo stuff. So let's try to give us one more time to deploy this application to our container platform. So when you go to developer sandbox, and actually you could have here code-ready workspaces. This is a web-based IDE tool, but I know a lot of people maybe don't use the web-based IDE tool because they're really prepared to use their own IDE tool like IntelliJ, VS Code, or some of them like even Ultra Edit. So, but if you're an enterprise company or the DevOps team try to move forward to more cloud native way, which means that maybe you gotta give some try to cloud environment for application development and deployment environment in day one. So code-ready workspaces is for developer. You don't need to install any pre-recorded software. For example, you don't need to install Maven tools. So you don't need to install some JDK or some necessary tools or CLI to build the application. So you just run code-ready workspaces and then just import your existing project from Git repository or GitLab, and then just get started your application development from day one. This is really awesome. You don't need to spend a lot of time to ready for your application development. So this is a really great approach to have cloud native development. And also you gotta also have cloud deployment environment on OpenShift cluster. So, and also there are quick starts. You could go to Quick Start and you can search a Quarkus thing, and then you can find the Quarkus application development. Getting started, you just spend 10 minutes and how to figure it out. You can figure out how to get started Quarkus application development and deploy to OpenShift. And also there are Helm charts, one of the popular packaging management for Kubernetes ecosystem. There are Helm charts and then to provide the standard Quarkus runtime from OpenShift cluster. You can also to build your Quarkus application to integrate streaming based on Apache Kafka. So this is all
Daniel,
the
Daniel, real quick. I wanted to make sure everyone knows. I put a link in the chat to the free developer sandbox environment. Obviously, we're not trying to push this on anyone. If you're looking for an easily deployable Kubernetes environment, it's just a great way to do exactly what it says, sandbox and play around. And Daniel, I put a link to your blog post actually, which talks about getting started with Quarkus in that sandbox. So just if you guys are interested, it's in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Sounds good. Yeah, this is a really great way to how to get started. So Quarkus thing, and also there are the Bini URL, or maybe Jeff, you can put in the chat here the Bini URL. And try to Quarkus here, the Bini/try to Quarkus. This is an interactive learning portal. There are a bunch of the Quarkus self-running courses. So you can just go to this web page, and you don't need to even sign up the developer sandbox, because sometimes, okay, I don't need to sign up and then I just go through some of the example, but specific use case of how to get started Quarkus application and the Kafka integration, and then for Spring developer stuff and the reactive programming, and also how to monitoring my application using micrometer, the capability, and how to create a web application like a web UI application, like one of the Quarkus template engine, and here is one of the popular enterprise Java application capability, like a CRUD for interaction database, like a Hibernate ORM and a Panache. So I think that maybe you got two approaches how to get started Quarkus application development. If you have some time and you 100% get ready for your own experience, you can go to the developer sandbox, or you can go to interactive learning portal. Okay, in the meantime, we got to success the Quarkus application deployment. Let's check it out, the bureau here, and then you can find here, so we can ignore warning message, and then now we can hear, so live coding activated. Typically, this is a production mode. You can imagine that one of the beauty of the container technology showcase the immutability and also portability. So which means you cannot change your code inside the container. You can actually do that technically, but we're not going to recommend that. This is the beauty of the container packaging mechanism. But the Quarkus allows you can change the application automatically. This is one of the feature for developer, but we're not going to recommend use this feature in production environment. Okay, back to my local environment. I'm going to add one more compilation here, live reload URL. So just to go to topology view and then click on URL. So this is the endpoint here, and back to here, maybe terminal window. And let's try to endpoint. and hello and greeting and NYJavaSIG 4. So we gotta have a welcome to Quarkus World, the New York Jug group, and they're totally working. And then I just copy the endpoint and then back to my application, and I try to set it on my endpoint URL, and then go to terminal window, and then let's try to run the Quarkus environment using Maven command line. And now we're going to use remote dev. Previously, I'm going to use a Quarkus dev, just running my local environment, but now using the different command line, the remote dev. Behind the scene, this local Quarkus environment try to connect to remote Kubernetes cluster based on the reload URL configuration. And also it authorized the security based on, we set it on the password. So you can find some little bit different logs when you run time. As an example, remote dev is thread connected to the server. So now we go back to my code and change the application, try to services here, welcome the Quarkus tour with the remote dev. I just save a file and then go back to here and try to one more time to fire up the endpoint. And when you go to here, and then the Quarkus runtime automatically detected some of the changed code. For example, here, greeting service Java file, and then compile as a class in the packaging jar, and sending the Java file to the Kubernetes. And to go back to here, we got a new end code here. So we got the same capability when you run the live coding functionality on my local, but now we can have the same capability with the remote Kubernetes cluster. So this is the great feature. I mean, this is in the end, this feature will increase the developer productivity on as long as you have a Quarkus framework to develop your microservice application. So that's it. I wanted to showcase the first demo. It takes a little bit longer. And if you have any question, and I'm gonna move forward to next demo right away.
Hey, Daniel, real quick. I learned something new today, that we're posting a bunch of links in the YouTube chat, and Rodrigo told us that YouTube actually cuts those out or deletes those. So what we'll do is we'll send I'll send a bunch of links to Barry to pass on. If not, I'll create a extra slide that gives you resources in the end, and we can distribute that out as well. So we'll make sure to get you guys these links. Sorry about that.
I'm working on posting that link, or at least one sent me right now.
Great,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, sounds good. So now the second demo, we're gonna bind this Quarkus application to a serverless stuff, but deploy to Amazon Lambda. So first of all, maybe if you have some experience to deploy application to Amazon Lambda, maybe you can think about the HTTP gateway or REST API gateway to access your actual function from external client. So Quarkus actually provides the same thing to create HTTP or REST API gateway automatically from your Quarkus application with some nice tool. So let me showcase how to do that first. So in order to that, I'm going to add a new extension, but for that, I'm going to remove the Quarkus OpenShift extension because we're not going to deploy this application to OpenShift any longer. And then once again, so let's try to find installable search like Amazon Lambda stuff, and then you can find a bunch of Amazon related extension. Here is like a HTTP REST, and there are X-Ray and SS3 storage. There are a lot of stuff you can actually use, and maybe you can find looking for some AI ML thing. We can actually integrate Amazon Alexa as well. Okay, so today I'm going to use the Amazon Lambda HTTP and the Quarkus ext, add the Amazon Lambda thing. And then this is the, in the end, when you package this application, you can find some nice output result. How do you deploy this application? Okay, back to here. And then let's change it here. I'm going to change some code to just a file. and then we're not going to use this all any longer. I just comment here, and then back to the here. We just deployed the one function to Amazon Lambda. To do that, I just delete one method here, and I just delete unnecessary packaging here, and it looks good, and nothing changed there. So I make it simpler, my application, and back to terminal window. Let's try to Maven packaging, clean packaging, and I'm gonna skip unit test. So actually, I didn't change any business logic on my Quarkus application. Just make it simpler, and then just edited Quarkus Amazon Lambda HTTP extension, because I'm going to deploy, I need to deploy this application to Amazon Lambda. All right. So once you packaging or even install this application, you have a Java file, and also, so you can find some little bit different output, like a function GIFs. It's a Lambda deployment file, and there are some Bootstrap example script, which is some kind of example Bootstrap script file for native deployment. And there are two templates. One is the JVM, the other one native compilation. But I'm going to use the JVM because the native compilation takes a little bit longer. Actually, let me see how it looks like the template here. To go to target directory, and here we go, JVM. And here is the all resources on Amazon Lambda is automatically generated. So in order to deploy this one, we needed to use the SAM, the SAM CLI. So what is the SAM CLI? Maybe if you have any chance to go through the SAM at the time, it's an Amazon serverless application model command line interface. You can use this CLI for testing for local environment, like a SAM local, and then you can actually deploy this application directly. So in order to save time, I'm going to deploy this application directly to my Amazon deploy, and I'm going to use template, target, and the JVM, and I'm going to use the interactive guide mode. But for run this command line, let's try to make sure my Amazon Lambda stuff. So here's my the Amazon dashboard, and then when you go to Lambda, and then go to status, there's no function, I guess. Okay, so there's no function here, and then API gateway. So, and nothing here, so nothing empty. And also IAM, so it's identity access management, because the Amazon Lambda basically access your function along with the access management. So as you see, we have 3 roles, and actually I create one for using another function, and then this Quarkus extension automatically create a new Amazon Lambda role. All right, get back to here, and let's try to deploy this application. So actually, I already create the S3 bucket storage. So try to Quarkus the stack name, Quarkus HTTP, and then my region, the US1, and I'm going to change the deploy, make sure confirm, and then I create the same CLI for ID role, and then authentication is okay, and then I'm going to save my configuration file, and then deploy. So as you see, the S3 bucket, it should be created when you deploy the function from Quarkus environment to Amazon Lambda for the first time, but it takes a little bit longer. So I just make that one ahead of time, actually 1.5 hours ago. So when you go to Amazon Lambda and then go to S3, and then you can find the pre-created my S3 bucket here. Here we go. So if you don't have any the same CLI S3 bucket storage, and then this command line will create the S3 storage automatically in the meantime. Get back to here. So as you see, here is the permission. It's okay. I am role created an API gateway. All looks good. and I just deploy the application. And then you can find some resource type, what kind of resource we're going to deploy to Amazon cluster, like IAM, the identity access management role, and also API gateway for HTTP protocol processing, and also actual application as Amazon Lambda function. As you see here, Amazon Lambda function, the name is getting started. And then it takes up sometimes maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute, depends on the how many application business you have, and also some kind of the network bandwidth is also changing. It takes impact your the runtime environment. Okay, we just done to deploy, and then you got us the runtime here. So let's try to access this one. And hello and good evening and NYJ, something like that. So this is a new endpoint because we deploy here the welcome Quarkus World Tour NYJ. And when you go to Amazon Lambda and then try to see API gateway, and then now we have new API gateway automatically Quarkus HTTP, just like the same name of our stack name, and then go to the identity access management, and we got a new one here. So here, new role just created during the time, and the most important thing is here Lambda. So when you go to Lambda thing, and then we have here function, and now we got a new function here. So it's the size 12.4 megabyte, and then we actually use testing here, one endpoint, just like I did my command window. So this is a really cool way to deploy the Quarkus application to Amazon Lambda. But I want to showcase one more thing. If you, to Jeff, just a quick question. Can I showcase one more thing? It takes maybe 5 minutes. Do you have enough time? Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So last thing is just imagine this. Sometimes your company wanted to have a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud strategy, which means the developer standpoint, you develop one microservices for serverless. And then that serverless deploys sometimes to Amazon Lambda, but sometimes the Kubernetes on-prem or Google function or Azure function. But you don't want to change your application business logic. So how do you do that? So Quarkus actually solved that problem for developer. So let me show you how it works here. So go back to my here, and then my application. The first step. So here is it. One more time, Quarkus command line ext, and then the existing extension. I'm gonna delete the Amazon Lambda HTTP, and then the other one is Quarkus ext and installable and search Funky. So Funky is one of the extension on Quarkus provide some create some portable Java API for developer and deploy this portable Java API, the multiple serverless platform from Amazon Lambda, Google, Microsoft, and Kubernetes, etc. So as you see, here is Amazon Lambda and Google and Knative event, and then a lot of stuff here. So you don't need to create the HTTP gateway because your Quarkus Funky automatically expose your endpoint with Amazon Lambda. So I'm going to add this new extension here. So Quarkus ext, add this one. And once we added a new extension, back to here, and here, and go to project and service. And then you just you don't need to any the pass window because Funky automatically expose your endpoint with the function name. To do that, you just need to only one the command the annotation func, and then you can actually specify your function name, something like that. But if you don't, it's default, your function name is your method name. And then automatically process your post method here. And then we just need to delete unnecessary packaging here. So previously, maybe you can already remember that it's the 21 or 25 line of code to implement the RESTful API, but now we have a 16 line of code, but same business application, pretty much simpler. So the same capability. And then one more thing, we need to specify explicitly the function name, the Quarkus funky export name greeting here. So just like here, the same method name. So pretty cool. That's it. I don't need to do anything more. And Maven clean. Package, I'm going to skip unit test one more time. And then once the packaging is application, there's a small different stuff when you packaging this application with the Amazon HTTP extension. So let me show you how cool it is. So once you're done, and then you're going to go to target directory, you can find everything is almost same. But there's one more thing here is a manage bash script. When you open the manage bash script here we go. And then there are a bunch of the Amazon CLI, like a Lambda CLI. So you don't need to run any Lambda thing to deploy this application. The Quarkus extension, funky extension automatically figured out this all stuff here. And then the one more thing, you're going to specify your the Lambda role ARN. I'm going to use the previous one. So I'm going to just copy here and then back to here and then just deploy the application. So target directory and then manage and just create. It's pretty simple using SAML, the same command line, because this is a wrapper bash script to invoke some of the capability to deploy your function to Amazon Lambda, like a create, invoke, even delete. Okay, I just success. And then finish that and back to here. And I'm going to go to function. And now you got a new function here, the getting start. And then you can actually test from Amazon GUI. So the name is just test event. And let's try to New York. And I user group. And I just click on test. And then your execution result will be show up here. And now welcome Quarkus world to a New York Java user group. Pretty awesome. So you don't need to create a new HTTP gateway, but Quarkus funky extension takes care of your old function deployment. But once you don't need to run this function any longer to save your costs on Amazon Lambda, like a pay-as-you-go strategy, so you need to delete one. So previously, you need to go to CloudFormation to delete existing stack. Something like here is the existing stack, click on that, and delete one. And once you delete the stack, it will delete all relevant resources like API, gateway, or Amazon Lambda, and also the role in IAM. But in the funky extension, you can actually do that the same way, like just delete it. It's pretty simple. It needs to make it faster than using CloudFormation. It's already done. And then go back to here. And let's try to go to Amazon Lambda. And all the function is gone. So this is a little bit different approach to use to bind your Amazon Lambda from Quarkus framework using Quarkus Funky and Quarkus HTTP, Amazon Lambda extension, etc. So that's it. That's it today for demo 1, demo 2 from developer productivity, from live coding, continuous testing, and enable compilation and remote dev mode. And also you can evolve your existing microservices to serverless using the traditional way like HTTP gateway, but also you can have the same capability to deploy Quarkus application to Amazon Lambda using Quarkus Funky. But one benefit with the Quarkus Funky, you can deploy this application to Kubernetes Knative or Google function and an Azure function without any code changes, but you print some application property on your application property file, like a target environment Azure function or Google function, something like that. Okay, that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Eric. I spent a lot of time. Sorry about that.
Hey, yeah, and for those who don't know, Eric came in late. He was on dad duty for the beginning part of the session.
Oh, yeah.
So Eric joined. And he's gonna. It looks like there's been some chatter and some talk around Spring, and there's at least a few Spring Boot developers out there. So we thought it'd be interesting. With any of these jugs, there's always Spring developers. So we thought it'd be interesting to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into Quarkus's Spring compatibility, and how to take an existing app and turn it into Spring. So with that, Eric, take over.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And like Jeff said, I apologize. I had dad duty. I didn't get back until about 7 o'clock here in the Eastern time. So appreciate the introduction here. Let me figure out how to share the right screen here.
Looks good.
All right, you see what I see? I think there's a delay on the YouTube. But
yeah, don't look at the YouTube. Look at the Zoom.
Yeah. So in any event, so what I'm going to show here is, so like I had mentioned before, I have a lot of experience in the Spring community. I was a contributor in Spring Security for quite some time when Spring Webflux first came out. So what I wanted to showcase here, not necessarily the compatibility stuff, but kind of what do the differences look like between Quarkus and Spring, if you're familiar with Spring from a Spring developer's perspective here. So I'm just reorganizing some windows around here. So I've got my IDE, my IntelliJ here. It's a pretty simple Spring Data JPA application, which communicates or talks to a Postgres database. So I've got some configuration where I'm setting up the URL. I'm going to run Postgres right here in the terminal in a Docker container, just on my local machine here. So I'll fire that up. While that's running, just a pretty simple fruit management thing. I've got a JPA entity class with just a couple of attributes, getters and setters, nothing real exciting or anything in here. I'm using the Spring Data JPA repository classes. So if you've used this before, essentially you just create an interface which extends one of Spring JPA's Spring Data's interfaces, and then you can add your own methods to this. And so the way this works is because it's an interface, when the application starts up, Spring Data will create an implementation for you, and then via conventions on how you declare your method signatures here. So like, for example, find by name will create an implementation that will search my table given and return something, or optionally return something or not if something by a certain name is found. And so there's a whole bunch of documentation, but the method signatures get pretty long, and what actually happens depends on what the signature looks like. And then the last part is just the front end, so a simple RESTful interface using Spring MVC. Got a couple different operations here, one that finds all the fruits that are there, one that gets a particular fruit given its name, or a 404 if it's not found. Some people start to think that, if I look for something and it's not there, it should be a 404. Some people think that I should return a 200 and empty. The semantics, we could have that, and talk about semantics over a beer or two, but I tend to fall more on the REST purist point of view, that if you ask for something and I don't have it, that you get a 404. So that's kind of how I've implemented it here. And then adding new fruit by posting a JSON body in, and then deleting fruits by name. And again, I take the same approach where if you go to delete something that doesn't exist, you get a 404 back. All right, and so if I fire this puppy up here, and give it a second. I'm using the latest version of Spring Boot that's out there now, 2.5.1. It starts up, it connects to my database, and then kind of like Dan was using earlier, I like the HTTP utility, so I can say HTTP port 8080, and then give me all my fruits, and there shouldn't be anything there because the database is empty. It has validation, so my entity, if you look at the fruit object, I've got a validation annotation on here. So if you try and post something in that doesn't have a name, it'll actually return a 400. So for example, if I try and post something, you get a 400 bad request. If I go in there, I can add a name in. Let's call it an apple. Oops. And now I posted a successful one. So now if I go to get it and say, give me all the fruits, I get a list of all the fruits. If I say, give me an apple, it gives me an apple. If I ask for a pear, it gives me a 404. And then if I say, okay, give me I want to delete my my apple, it gives me back a 204 in this case, which just means it was successful with no content. If I try and delete something else that doesn't exist, I get a 404 back. And if I go back and try and give me all my fruits, I've got nothing. Right. So nothing really out of the too out of the ordinary or crazy or much going on there. Right. So if I kill this, and what I want to do is now I actually want to build this from scratch in Quarkus, and I can do that probably in about 5 minutes or so. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, and Dan, I missed the beginning of the talk. Did you show the code.quarkus.io and whatnot? I assume.
Yeah, I just showed that, but you can actually remind that people.
Yeah, so rather than go to the website, I'm actually going to use the tooling right in my IDE. And I'm, pretty much every good developer is, puts up a fuss about the tools that they use, and I'm no different. I like IntelliJ. I have tried VS Code, and I just cannot do it. So I'm going to use IntelliJ. But the difference that I'm going to do here is I'm going to build it completely reactive from the REST layer all the way down into the database, which Spring Data JPA isn't something that you can do that with. There is another Spring project called Spring Data R2 DBC that does reactive data access, but it's not a true object relational system. It doesn't use Hibernate under the cover. It's really more of a high-level mapping tool, whereas Quarkus Reactive with Panache actually uses Hibernate and Hibernate Reactive with all the JPA stuff under the covers to do a complete reactive from soup to nuts, non-blocking and whatnot, all the way down to your persistence layer. So that's what I'm going to do here. Quarkus Reactive JPA. And then I'm going to pick a bunch of extensions, and the ones that I'm going to pick here, so I need some reactive stuff, right? So I'm going to use Jackson as my marshaller. I'm going to pick Hibernate Reactive. I'm going to use the reactive Postgres driver. I'm going to do YAML configuration because I like YAML and keep it consistent with my Spring application. And then I need the validation, the Hibernate validator as well. And so with those 5 extensions, bring this over here. All right, once this guy starts up, the first thing I'm going to do, Dan probably talked about, we've got a new Quarkus 2.0 coming up. I'm going to go up to the bleeding edge. I'm going to, instead of the current release version, I'm also going to go to the latest candidate release. It would help if I put in the actual number here. All right. And then the first thing I need to do is, you notice right now there's nothing in my configuration. The first thing I need to do is tell it that I want my Hibernate to generate my schema for me, when I start my So when my application starts up, based on the annotations and the POJOs and entities that I have in my source code, I wanted to generate the schema for me. Probably not something you're going to do in production, but for local development, it's great. But you notice one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to define any data sources. Something that Quarkus is going to do for me when it starts up. So right now I don't have any code. I'm just going to I'm sure Dan talked about dev mode and whatnot. So I'm going to fire up my dev mode, my Quarkus dev, and I'm going to let it start up. And what you're going to notice real quick, I am running the Docker daemon here, and Quarkus, when it starts up, when the dev mode starts up, it kind of takes a look at my application and says, hey, looks like you've got a database driver, in this case, the reactive Postgres driver. You probably need a database. You didn't configure one, so you probably need one. So right now, Quarkus actually connected to the Docker daemon, and it actually started a database container for me, and it wired it into my application so that I don't even have to worry about doing any kind of configuration whatsoever. Now, there's no schema yet. It hasn't, create, because I don't have any entities or whatnot, so it hasn't really done anything other than create and start up the database container for me. But we'll kind of leave that there in the background while we continue on a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a couple packages here. I like org acme. I don't get much more. Every time I think of org.acme, I think of the Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner on those Acme rockets. That kind of shows my age a little bit. Those are the cartoons I used to watch on Saturday mornings. In any event, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my entity class. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back to my Spring application, and I'm going to take the exact same entity class from my Spring application, imports and everything. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to new class. Boom. Compiles and everything. So that one's easy. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my repository. So it's going to follow the exact same pattern that Spring follows. One main difference, though, is if you remember in the Spring example, the repository class was an interface. In Quarkus, this is actually going to be a class instead of an interface, but it's going to implement a base repository that Quarkus provides as part of Panache. And so Panache is the Spring data or repository implementation that Quarkus brings and puts on top of Hibernate. So, if you just want to do JPA and Hibernate out of the box, it'll just work if you want to just use the JPA standards and entity managers and whatnot. But Panache gives you this ability to do the repositories and whatnot on top of it. And because it's a class, we actually need to make this a bean that's application scoped. And then our Spring example had in our repository had a couple of extra operations. I'm just going to copy these in here, these method signatures, and then modify them a little bit. So we said the first thing is that this is a class, not an interface, right? So if we actually need an implementation, right? But the other thing we said is this is going to be completely reactive. So we can't just return regular objects. We need to have a reactive pipeline where we're going to do stuff in the pipeline. And so Quarkus with microprofile and SmallRye has this reactive framework called Mutiny. And if you're familiar with Spring, and Spring Webflux has very similar paradigms and classes and whatnot. So instead of monos and fluxes, you have unis and multis. So instead of an optional of fruit, this is going to be a uni of fruit, meaning a uni is 0 or 1 thing. And then similar here, instead of a long, it's going to return uni long. And the return for long just means how many things were actually deleted by the query. And so here, the Panache repository actually has a whole bunch of methods already on it. So I can just say return find, and I want to return by the name field, give it the name that's passed in, and then I want the first result. And this is going to return a reactive pipeline. Similar here, I'm going to return, and then I'm going to delete by name, given the name, right? And that's about it. Now our repository is done. And the last thing we need to do is our REST layer. So in Spring, they call it a controller. In JAX-RS, which is the standard that Quarkus is based on top of for RESTful services, we call them resource classes. So I'm going to call this a fruit resource. So the first thing we need to define the path, the top level path that all of these endpoints fall under. And I think I called it fruits in my other example. And then we need to inject our repository. Personally, I prefer the the constructor injection over auto wiring or parameter injection, just because I feel like I'm kind of old school. I like having all my attributes in my classes be private final, and I want my constructors to tell me what I actually need to construct a class. But different people feel different way, and it works, regardless. So I'm going to inject my repository and tell IntelliJ to create my constructor for me. And then I think there were a couple of methods here. There was a get all, list of fruit. There was a get all one. We'll come back and fill these in a minute. There was a get one, right? Get fruit given some name. There was a let's add one given, and then we'll take one in. And then there was a delete one, I think. Public void given a name, right? I think those are the four methods that we had here. So when we want to do reactive, what we're going to do is now we need to return reactive pipeline. So at first thought, you might start thinking, hey, this should be a multi of fruit, right? But you got to kind of take a step back and think about, well, what is my underlying data source? If I'm like reading from something like Kafka that's constantly pushing events to me, well, then multi kind of makes sense because I'm dealing with an unbounded or infinite set of data. But when I'm talking about, even though I'm doing reactive access to, I'm still working with a traditional relational database here. That database is not pushing events to me. And when I query all of them, I want to get all the rows, right? And I want to do it in one shot, and I want to keep the connection open for a long period of time. So in that instance, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to return a uni of a list. Now, it doesn't mean it's the only way to do this, but for my example here, it makes the most sense because it's explicit, saying I'm going to give you one list, a finite set of things that you're going to return, right? And in this case, you see the list all method actually returns that method signature. There's a stream variant of this as well, but this is the way I prefer to do it. And then we need to add our annotation. So this is going to be a get. I'm going to put up here that all of our endpoints produce a JSON media type. So this is a get. And then getting a single fruit, this is going to be a path variable or a path parameter. Right, and then this is a get, and then has a subpath call with that's parameterized. And then, but if you remember in our Spring example, it returned the fruit if it was there, but it returned a 404 if it was not. So in that instance, in the Spring example, we returned this response entity, right, which is the Spring MVC way of being able to dynamically change response codes and whatnot. So JAX-RS has something similar called the response object. So instead of returning the fruit, I'm actually going to return the uni of the response in this instance. And so what I can say here is, okay, return my fruit repository. We have our find by name, and then as part of the pipeline, so on my item, if it's not null, meaning there was something returned, I want to actually transform that into my response. Build, and then if it is null, so if it isn't there, I want to continue with a status of not found. And that's my get fruit method. Jeff, was there a question? I heard you, I can't see the chat, but I hear it dinging.
No, no, you're good.
I'm good, okay. If a question comes up or someone has a question, just interrupt me because I hear it, but I don't see it.
Yep, you're good.
I'm good. All right, so the fruit, the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the fruit. So here, when we start talking about storing things into the database, we need transactions, right? And so in Quarkus, transactions and transaction management is part of the reactive pipeline. And so what I'm going to do here is Panache has this nice little utility for, I can just say, hey, do whatever this needs to be done within the context of a transaction, right? And so here I'm just going to say this fruit repository dot persist, right? And again, I don't want to return the fruit. I want to return a uni of the fruit. And then this is going to be a post, and it's going to consume JSON. And then I need to make sure that my input is not null and that it's valid. So I trigger the validation. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to do the delete. But again, remember, if the thing isn't that we're trying to delete, if there's nothing found, we actually want to return a 404. So instead of returning a void, again, I'm going to return the uni of my response, right? And so here I can say, and again, I need to do in a transaction, I can say delete by name, the one that we had written. And then now that transaction is there, I can say, okay, now I want to map this. So I'm going to say fruit. And this is going to be no content. And that should be enough there. Oh no, actually I need to look at, because it's going to return the number of records it actually did, not the fruit itself. So this is going to be the number of records deleted, right? Because the method actually returned, the delete by name returns a long, it's a uni long. So if the records are, oops. So if my records deleted 0, then status of not found. Otherwise, now that should be good. And now we just need to annotate it. Delete, and then the path. And now I think we've got a fully functional application. So let's try it out. So it's already up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and I'm going to run those same commands we already had. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, show me all the fruits. And you notice in the background, it's actually recompiling. It's generating my database. I didn't have to do anything. There's nothing there. So let's try to add some fruits in there. We can show that, hey, I got a validation. I didn't specify the name. Let's create an apple. Yep, now I've got an apple there. So now if we get all the fruits, I can look at the apple. If I want to try and find a pear, and then I can try to do a delete. Got the 204. If I try to delete it again, I should get a 404. And now I've got no more fruits. And that's just about it. Adding fruits is making me hungry.
Nice.
That's what it is. So this is completely and fully reactive from the REST layer, the HTTP layer, all the way down to the database, all on non-blocking IO, and there's really nothing different. But what's kind of interesting here is, say I wanted to add, I had something that was blocking, right? I needed to do something that had blocking work. So for example, I'll just put in another endpoint, public string, hello, the typical hello world. Right. I can say this is a get and call this hello. I can just say, hey, this is a blocking method. And now I can say, now I've introduced blocking work in the same, so I can mix and match blocking, non-blocking. The whole core of Quarkus is still non-blocking, but I can instruct that certain pieces of work are blocking, and Quarkus will take care of when this method executes, moving it off onto worker thread so that I don't block the IO thread automatically. That's about all I've got here.
All right, I will steal it back from you, Eric. Eric, that was great. I guess we'll wrap it up. I think no other outstanding comments or questions in the YouTube. So, we kind of covered the Q&A as we went along. First, just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you all. I hope you found it interesting and fascinating, and hopefully you'll go and try it on your own, because we all know that's probably the best thing you can do. So one thing first, we are going to get you guys some swag. So I'll work with Barry to get some Quarkus t-shirts. I think you can see Daniel's wearing one now, and we got some guitar picks and those kind of things. So we'll work to get you that. Keep in mind one thing, they do run a little bit smaller. So I'll work with Barry to make sure we kind of size up and get you a bunch of different shirts. So hopefully when you guys get back to in person, hopefully over the next couple of months, we can, I'm sure Barry will get those out to you however he sees fit. I wanted to leave you with some other links too. Quarkus.io, that's where to go to get all the guides and great things. If you're interested, the community of Quarkus is really, really interactive. So they all live in Zulip, which is yet another tool like Slack. So if you're interested, go to Quarkus.io Zulip chat. If you're doing anything, they're very responsive. All the developers for Quarkus live there. It's a great site. So if you're running into trouble or just want to bounce some things off people, that's a great place to start there. That's enough. So thank you again for the opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to Barry, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jeff, Daniel, and Eric for that enlightening presentation. Once again, I remind our viewers, please follow us on Twitter at NYJavaSIG and become a member. You can do so by visiting javasig.com. We'll see you next time.